Good evening, everyone. Thank you to Rick for inviting me here. It's a real pleasure to be here, especially now that I know how many designers are in the room. Just like Robert, I don't get a chance to speak to this many designers, so I'm among kindred spirit. But one of my objectives today is to take a step back and look at who we are as designers and what our position is and where we might be headed. So let's just look at this number. It's 7 followed by 9 zeros, right? And most of you know what this is about. It is the population of the planet as was estimated to be on the 31st of October last year. So it's an astounding number. And just to get a sense of how astounding this number is, we added 1 billion in the last 12 years, but it took us from the beginning of time till the early 1900s to get to the first billion, right? And since that time, since October last, we've added roughly the population of Iran, which is somewhere between the population of France and Germany, to our numbers. So why is this an important number? It is not just because this number implies a resource shortage. We are 1.4 times the carrying capacity of the planet. We need another planet right next to Earth about 0.4 times the size in order to sustain our habits. But I think there is a deeper issue. And the deeper issue is that there is a huge nexus of forces at play that makes this number a serious number for us. And that is that this 1.4 times the carrying capacity of the planet is artificially held low by a level of global inequity which is simply unacceptable. And this is exactly at the same time that we have come to realize that some of the bedrock of our civilization, which is continued availability of resources such as oil and water and food, are not something we can have a lot of confidence in having the same kind of supplies. So it's a little bit like finding out that you're falling out of an airplane and the ground is rushing at you. But then there's a chance that you'll hear a noise, and that's the noise of the ripcord going, and there's a nice big parachute that you'll see billowing in top of you. And where would one place that trust? Ideally, one would place the trust in the big institutions, the business houses, our government systems, our ways of thinking, our ways of operating. But wait, that is in part what has created the situation for us. So we now need a way of thinking ourselves out of this box that we find ourselves in. So I would like to pose what I like to call a fishhook question. It's a question with a barb at the end of it, and this is the kind of question that likes to lodge itself in your brain and spawn new questions. It has that irritating aspect to it, right? And the question I think that I'd like to pose is, what is the thinking? What is the thinking that we need to ensure a different future? A kind of future that would give us a better confidence that we are moving into a more resilient, more equitable, and a more sustainable time. And right now, I think that collective confidence in it, when it's framed at such a large level, I would argue it ought to be low. So while I've framed this horrific picture of us hurtling towards this ground without a parachute, and that constitutes a very, very tense moment in the history of our civilization, it is also to be noted that our design field is undergoing one of the biggest revolutions ever. This is an amazing time to be a designer, and I'd like to speak a little bit about that. But so let's take a step back and fast forward really quickly through what has happened in the design field in the last 15 years, but also to frame this big thing that's happening, that we entered an experience economy and we made a lot of hay out there, and we developed some skill sets, and we developed a way of operating, but we are entering an economy that I'd like to argue is the transformation economy. So in order to ask ourselves what we are, let's pose this question: what good are we, right? And I'm using the word man in a very gender neutral way, as gender neutral as possible. But let's see what this is about. Like, this term that's come about called design thinking is just a loose term that defines the way in which designers think differently from people in other disciplines. So it's essentially about 15 years ago, the different design fields realized that there was a larger upwelling of understanding that designers operate in different ways. And this difference is very salient in the kind of questions that need to be answered that our dominant fields were not doing a particularly good job of. So what was design thinking being asked to perform? We were being asked to create completely new experiences, to envision new futures, to create new systems, to create strategies. So to use our imagination and our ability to work across disciplines to create interventions to really large challenges. But this ability to create vision also gave us the ability to argue that the next step should not just be based on what has happened before, but in terms of a vision of an alternate future. But what is also emerging right now is that it's spelling a new form of leadership. And this is a conversation I'm having with the deans of many different the business schools, etc., which is that this is a different way of operating, and it's a new form of leadership. And the business world has also identified that this kind of thinking is associated with the difference between red ocean strategies and blue ocean strategies. Red ocean strategies is where all the sharks are going for the same food. It's highly competitive, and the name of the game is better marketing and sometimes a brand play that'll get people to believe that your wares are better than the next person's. But the blue ocean strategy is a way of operating where you use your ingenuity to create value in a domain where currently there are no competitors. They will come, but for the moment you get to write the rule books. Right? And so that is the capacity to come up with blue ocean strategies is absolutely fantastic, and that is somewhat congruent to what designers are able to do. And at a larger level, if we take a step back and say, okay, well, how do we operate? Our processes involve digging up really, really deep insights from our ability to empathize with people and digging under the surface and using those to reframe the question and identify some really nice questions that are meaningful. And based on that, we are able to come up with a lot of concepts, innovative concepts and prototypes that further allow us to go and test them and come up with insights, but also going around some really, really salient question, and we are good at asking these questions. So this is something that we designers do a pretty good job of, right? And our techniques allow us to make a very careful discernment between what is the right thing to do versus just doing it right, and making sure that before we spend a lot of effort in implementing something, that we've actually made sure that it's pointed in a good direction. So these are things we do well. And so if I were to just run down some capabilities, we're very good at gaining an empathic understanding of the human condition, and we are able to synthesize, not just analyze, to put together and make sense of complex information. And then we do something that is of critical importance that Robert also mentioned, which is we are able to frame questions in very, very important ways. And this is something that we're very good at. And then, of course, we are very good at brokering conversation and discourse among stakeholders that otherwise would have a very suboptimal conversation among each other. And we know how to build bridges between things at very high strategic and abstract value, but a very intimate experiential level. And this ability for us to do both makes it such that the value of where the rubber hits the road in terms of the experience is maintained, but the strategic intent is not lost. And of course, we know how to clarify and visualize complexity in ways that can be made communicable without losing the sense of complexity. So we don't necessarily conflate it into simplistic terms. And we propose visions, like we said, and this is something that we can help people do. So this is, of course, finally what it boils down to. We come up with propositions. We actually generate innovative solutions and concepts that outperform normative techniques. And that's why we are called the creatives, and we use our creativity to come up with solutions that otherwise might not be obvious. And then we know how to implement it and take it home and maintain the design intent. But in doing this, in doing all of this, what we land up doing as a byproduct is that we create new value systems. We create new value systems, we create new sense of agency, we create new outcomes, and above all, we create new behavioral systems. So this is the game we play, right? So while some of our effort goes towards managing the present, a lot of our actual progress is directed towards creating alternate futures. This is what our game is. This is what we do very, very well. And of course, this is also what we do well, which is that we make a distinction between value capture and value creation. And we are able to create new value, which is where I would like to bring this notion of value creation into this domain that is so germane to all of us, which is how do we create social value. And first and foremost, I would like to expand the bookends of social value and not just have a knee-jerk reaction of what it means to do so, to provide value for social concerns. Let's consider this image, right? It's a little girl carrying firewood somewhere in Africa. There's an adobe building with a corrugated roof building behind. Now this one image is such a depiction of our systems that have failed at a colossal level, right? This is not just a social problem. It is at once a social problem, an environmental problem, an economic problem, and a resilience problem. This girl is probably also malnourished, probably also has to help in fetching water, probably will not go to school, and there's a significant chance that before she's 16, she might be raped on the way back from fetching water. And there are the high likelihood that I won't see her in a class at Stanford, right? And we've allowed this to come to pass, right? This is what we've allowed to have happen, right? So something about our mental models regarding progress need retooling, as do our ways of conducting business and the thinking deep down in the way we make decisions. And I would argue that even in the way we innovate needs retooling, and that's both an opportunity and a challenge. So we look at things that at a very immediate, intimate level, such as the design and the experience of a single touch point in a system, such as where the button on a screen is or some such thing, all the way up to institutional artifacts, such as our belief systems and our legal systems and business systems, etc. Of course, all of it needs to somehow go towards a world that operates very differently. And while I think we'll always maintain our ability to create that very experiential aspect, that's what we excel at, we also need to expand into the ways in which we can change the larger institutions. So if we were to say that the outcome of what we want has to not just do one thing, but it has to create value on social fronts, on economic fronts, and environmental fronts, and create resilient systems, then what would it take to get there? And if you look at it, we actually need to retool a whole lot of stuff, right? We need to change our organizational structures, the leadership, the decision-making systems, the way we innovate, the way we strategize with technology, how we frame impact, et cetera, right? And why is this a problem? Why do we need to retool it? Because our disciplines have built them into incredibly deep silos, and a lot of the action is at the bottom of the silo, right? This is how we operate. All our fields take a great deal of pride in how deep they go, and there are thick walls between the silos, huge big thick walls, and we talk different languages, and once in a way, a hole gets drilled between these walls. And so you have something like bioengineering, or you have something at a more applied level that is integrated. But meanwhile, we have these perceptual lenses that we look at the world through. We have each of us, our disciplines are caught in these perceptual lenses, but the world is a very, very integrated system, but our disciplines are not. And so this is the issue. The issue is that at the level of the integration, we do not have the right kind of thinking in place that is commensurate with the level of sophistication we have got at the depth of the silos. And this is where innovation has a canvas. This is where we, as designers, we have natural skill sets to create these connections and create the dialogue between the disciplines, and go beyond the notion of collaboration. Because collaboration is something that exists in every organization, and we know how to do it, et cetera. But co-creation is a slightly different concept. So the difference between collaboration and co-creation is that in collaboration, you're still constrained to the exact same way you played yesterday. You're caught between your disciplinary boundaries. But if you co-create, and if you work in a transdisciplinary manner where you surround the problem with people of different disciplines and depth, and especially if you bring design into the mix, you allow it to rise above that plane and create new ways of thinking and new rubrics in order to solve challenges that we don't have particularly good answers to. And this is the other thing you get to do. You can look at a really challenging problem, and you get a disciplinary parallax, and if you get a discourse going, you can actually see something that any one disciplinary lens makes it imperceptible, right? So this is the notion with which we've been working, and one of the things that's the platforms that we are using is something called Change Labs, and at Stanford I teach innovation, I teach design strategy, et cetera. But this is a platform where we are asking what constitutes scale transformation, right? And we are taking a very transdisciplinary and transagency point of view, and transagency is different, transdisciplinary is different from multidisciplinary. It's a game where people go beyond, they transcend their disciplinary boundaries and create new tools and new processes. And it's a little bit like a game of soccer where there are larger objectives, such as scoring more goals than are scored against you, but the ball is passing back and forth between disciplines, and we are having some really great successes in creating new rubrics. But the Change Labs at a structural level is conducting research on large-scale transformation. It's working on projects, because projects are a fantastic way in which to understand this thing, but this whole thing of large-scale transformation, but they are really aspirational projects. And then we are asking, how can we scale this thinking? How do we do this, right? And so some of the things that we are looking at is a rubric for scale transformation. We're looking at this issue of new transdisciplinary combinations, such as behavioral sciences and innovation. We're looking for new ways of operating and new paradigms that have their own rule sets. And then we are looking at is there a theoretical basis for this, and are there processes around it, and are they easily transferable? And we are looking at this thing saying, okay, initiatives in the future will have to meet multiple objectives, And so we are saying, okay, how do we operate there? And this is an important thing. We are looking at how do we frame leadership 2.0 and what is innovation 2.0. But in doing that, we are realizing that we are also taking on business 2.0. And recently, we've actually embarked on this issue of how do you redesign the policymaking system. So just as a quick example, because I'm out of time, one of our projects is called the 100-liter water project. And what we're essentially looking at is a highly integrated issue, which is the paucity of water in distributed communities. And there are 1.1 billion people who lack safe drinking water. And so we are asking, what is the last mile of the water problem? Well, how do you get an assurance, water assurance, of 100 liters per family at the very least to people who are at such far ends of the distribution chain that the cost of centralized distribution is far too expensive? But this is just one project, but what we are really after is the thinking, and we are trying to create a rubric. These are early days. It's very exciting work, and we could use all the help we can. So anyone who's interested in this kind of thinking would love to partner with you and collaborate with you. Thank you.